our city is brokenhearted. The untimely loss of Mark Samuelian so suddenly and so unfairly feels impossible to process. But today, we have to gather to celebrate him. And while this is really hard to process, Mark Samuelian should not be someone who is hard to celebrate. So with that, I'm going to ask the Miami Beach Fire Rescue and Miami Beach Police Department Honor Guard, please rise for the presentation of colors. This time I would ask a dear friend of Mark's. They met when they were 18 years old at Georgia Tech. Carl Welty, could you please come up and thank you for coming down for this.
Thanks for coming. Yeah, here to celebrate Mark. Lead you in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Order. Arms.
Please retire the colors.
Honor guard. Right. Face. Forward. March. Left. 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 Right. Left. 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 Right. Left. 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 Left.
This time, I'd ask Michael Rossi and the Miami Beach Classical Music Festival to perform their rendition of American the Beautiful. remain standing. This time I would ask for our opening prayer and invite up the Very Reverend Father Simeon Adabashian, the Vicar of the Armenian Diocese of America.
Dear friends, I am going to offer the prayer that comes from the Requiem service of the Armenian Apostolic Church. Հոգվոցն անկուցելոց Քրիստոս Աստված արահանքիստ եւ ողորմություն եւ մեզ մեղավորացս շնորհյա ըստ հողություն հանցանած մերոց. Lord have mercy, Lord have mercy, Lord have mercy. O Christ, Son of God, forbearing and compassionate, have compassion in your love as our Creator upon the souls of your servants who are at rest, especially upon the soul of your servant Mark Samuelian, for whom we offer these prayers. Be mindful of him and of all our daily departed in the great day of the coming of your kingdom. Make them worthy of mercy, of expiation and forgiveness of sins. Glorify and count them with the company of your saints at your right hand. For you are Lord and Creator of all, Judge of the living and of the dead, and to you is befitting glory, dominion, and honor, now and always, and unto the ages of ages. Amen.
Please be seated. So about 15 years ago, I got the job in my family of doing the slideshows for everybody's bar mitzvah and bat mitzvahs. I learned how to program them. And so I offered Laura that I could cull through the photographs and do the slideshow you're watching, and she graciously agreed. But it's interesting when you go through a slideshow, when you go through all the photos you have to pick from, you can really tell a lot, because I only knew Mark when he became a commissioner, when he was running for office, when he was in our city, but he had a whole life before that, and a life in addition to that, obviously. And so I got to look at all the photographs of his life, picking which ones and how you're focused on it. I'm making it much more complex than it really is. But there are a few things that are pretty obvious if you look through those photographs, as I did and as you have. First of all, I don't know how Joe Admonson is in every photograph. I don't know how that happened, but his face, in every moment he was serving, every single moment, you can see that this is somebody who loved being a commissioner, loved serving, really had a surgeon's heart. He wanted to be a commissioner, not to be important, but to do important things. And you can see that in the glow he has everywhere he is. It was really amazing. The photos of him playing chess, so many of him playing chess. And I know he loved the strategy, and he loved the competition, and he loved winning. But when you look at the photos of him teaching children and others how to play chess, you see that what he really loved was imparting to someone else the delight and experience that he got from this. And of course, the photos of Mark with Laura. It's almost as if each one is precisely the same. Their face filled with joy, filled with love. It's such an honest and beautiful smile that it can only accompany the truest of connections. And with that, I'd like to invite Laura up to say a few words about her beloved.
Thank you for coming to celebrate Mark's life. He was an amazing person that left us much too soon. I want to give a special thank you to the mayor and his chief of staff, the director of marketing and also tourism, and also to the police and fire department, Michael Rossi, Elizabeth Zito, the Miami Beach Classical Music Company, Higher Serpo Dabashian, and all the speakers. Most of all, I want to thank the residents of Miami Beach. You've all written so many beautiful tributes about Mark and have shown me so much love and support. Today you will hear different perspectives about Mark and his background. To me, he was my love and an extraordinary human being. Mark stood for everything that was good. He was genuine, he had dignity, he was unbelievably intelligent, and was an excellent listener. He was kind, he had integrity, principle, ethics, good character. He was an eternal optimist. He was also logical and analytical, and a great communicator. Mark was a good person with a brilliant mind. He was very accomplished. He liked to play by the rules and was very confident, and people were drawn to him. He expected so much from himself. Mark and I met in 2012, and we met the old-fashioned way, online. Our first date was at Green Street in Coconut Grove, and we instantly clicked and became inseparable during our almost 10 years together. At the time, he was living at the Bentley Bay on West Avenue, and I learned that he was from Boston, grew up in Dedham, Massachusetts, had attended Georgia Tech, and then worked for Emerson Electric in Troy, Michigan, for 3 years before applying to graduate school at Wharton. He told me about working as a management consultant out of New York for Accenture. I also learned about his late mother, Florence, and the huge impact that she had on his life. I, in future dates, also learned about his passion for chess and his proud Armenian heritage. Hearing about his life, I could see how driven he was. We quickly learned that we had different approaches to achieving results, but our values were the same, and that created a deep bond between us. Our following dates were at Byres on Lincoln Road, Le Groutonnerie, and Puerto Sagua. And it was on those dates that I really learned what a tremendous chess player he was. As a kid and later a teenager, he used to enter tournaments across the country for cash prizes, in addition to playing for the schools that he was attending. We did a lot of travels together. Our first trip was to Las Vegas to meet up with his dad, Sam, and brother, Bruce. I met his sister, Linda, a few months later during a trip to Boston. Throughout the years, I also met his cousins, Oscar Jr., Oscar III, Jamie, and even his sweet Aunt Nancy and cousin John, and dear friends of his like Steve and Chris and Carl, Bobby, Dave, and Jackie. Soon after we started dating, I invited Mark to attend a family event at my parents' house. And I have a fun, loud, very curious family that speaks a lot of Spanglish. They had been hearing all about Mark, and they were very excited to meet him. But I put them all on notice. I told them, Mark is very gentlemanly, courteous, all-American, New England background. Please don't scare the gringo. Fortunately, they all hit it off. He loved them, and they just adored Mark. We were all most impressed when Mark took Spanish lessons shortly after, and he would practice his Spanglish at my parents' house every chance he could with my family. He was always so sweet with my niece and nephew. He was very generous with his time, with my parents and my brother and sister-in-law. He was truly a part of our family. During our first year, Mark was selected by Wharton to co-chair their public policy initiative, and their goal was to leverage the school's resources to engage for better informed policymaking in Washington. And we traveled to New York for 1 week a month for that entire year, because the meetings took place at the Penn Club, because New York City has the largest amount of Wharton graduates around the country. And since I worked from home, I would just bring my computer. I met his close friends in New York, like Hani, who flew in from New York to be here, Scott, Steve, Ari, Alan, Peter, and Robin. It was that public policy work that started to get Mark more interested in contributing to help on local issues in Miami Beach. He became involved with Miami Beach United, the Alton Road Business Association, the Belle Isle Residents Association, Pets Trust, Global Ties, Miami Design Preservation League. When he decided to run for office, Mark liked to learn, so we attended workshops with the Good Government Initiative because Mark wanted to learn more about being a candidate, what the ethics rules were, and running campaigns. We ran 3 campaigns together in Miami Beach and knocked on thousands of doors, attended countless community meetings, and Mark really learned the issues by speaking to the residents and the city administration and also the business community. He was elected in 2017. He won every precinct and winning almost 70% of the overall vote, and he won unopposed just last year for re-election. And as the mayor said, Mark loved being a commissioner. He worked enthusiastically to make Miami Beach better, and he certainly left his mark in Miami Beach. Some of his accomplishments and things he advocated for: one was the GeoBond program, which included projects like the completion of the beach walk and funding for progress on the Bay Walk. He also advocated for implementation of the Inspector General's office. He passed an ordinance establishing the first ever resiliency standards for tidal flood protection and construction standards for seawalls and other tidal flood barriers in Miami Beach. He also sponsored a resolution creating the Miami Beach Resiliency Fund with a grant program for private property adaptation, something that I believe is starting this summer. Mark consistently supported public safety measures and the enhancement of policing and dedicated code enforcement, particularly on Ocean Drive. Mark could routinely be relied upon to support quality of life measures, including the liquor license reform, elimination of noise exemptions, regulations of dangerous vehicles, strengthening of the Sidewalk Cafe Code of Conduct, taking action to curb illegal short-term rentals, and putting an end to abuse that adversely affects residents and our quality of life. Mark was a champion for residents. He strongly supported the Residents' Right to Know ordinance, and when it came to major decisions affecting our city, he insisted on robust public outreach. Mark believed that engaging with the residents was the key to good government, and that obtaining community input and feedback on major decisions is just as important as the decisions themselves. And he always liked to look at both sides before making a final decision. These were the values he embraced as a public servant. He loved listening to residents, advocating for the residents. He really loved every minute of it. And that is what makes Mark's legacy so authentic. And all of these things are what made the community really love and support Mark. Mark enjoyed fitness and worked out every single morning. For years, we had a weekly yoga date at Green Monkey in Sunset Harbor. On days that he was headed to City Hall, Mark would walk from our home, and when he wasn't at City Hall, you'd probably catch him walking around Belle Isle Park, the Bay Walk, the Beach Walk, or Lincoln Road. He was a thinker, and he would use that time to process different challenges that were coming up in his life. He also enjoyed wellness, and we had a tradition of visiting the Carillon or the Standard the day before a commission meeting. On commission days, our tradition was that I would have Joe's Takeout waiting for him when he got home, and his favorite was the lobster Reuben. Our travels took us to many beautiful places. Some of our more memorable trips were to Canyon Ranch in the Berkshires, Lake Tahoe, Santorini, Singapore, Hong Kong, Italy, and especially Armenia, which is where we visited in 2019 with our friends Jack and Jody and Carolyn and Andrew. Mark's favorite music included smooth jazz, like Michael Franks and Bobby Caldwell. He also liked Stevie Wonder and Sting and John Mayer. He indulged in my more rock-style groups too, and we loved live entertainment and would often catch shows at the Fillmore or the Bandshell in North Beach and other South Florida locations. We also were regulars at the Colony Theater for Miami New Drama's performances. We lived a life full of adventures together. Mark and I had talked about getting a puppy in the last year, and we're deciding on the right time. In April, Mark said, "Let's get a puppy now. I want for the 3 of us to bond. I most worry about leaving you alone and want you to have a companion when I'm gone. So if you see me with Wendy around town, stop so you can meet her." A few weeks ago, Mark was reflecting on his life, And he said to me that he was content. He was thinking that there was no place that he wished he would have gone to that he hadn't already been, and there were no accomplishments that were weighing on him. And there would be two things that would be weighing on him now if he hadn't have done them, and said I was able to help him do both. One was going to Armenia, which we did, and the second was being elected to commissioner in Miami Beach. He loved Miami Beach so much. Mark was at peace. Mark was a wonderful partner to me. He made my dreams come true. He made me laugh every day. He was loving, patient, generous, a great listener and communicator. He was my biggest supporter and my best friend. We loved each other so much. I am a better person for having known him. Someone wrote me online that Mark was the Mark in remarkable, and I agree. I love you, Mark. You're forever in my heart.
You know, civility in the public square is becoming more and more rare. I've served in the legislature for 10 years with hundreds of people. I've been mayor for 5 years, got at least a dozen colleagues there. I have never served with anybody who was more respectful of their colleagues than Mark Samuelian. It was just like against his DNA to say something personally offensive to somebody else, and especially when the residents and the community was watching. But if there's a second to him in our commission, it is Commissioner Steve Miner. So Steve, why don't you come on up and say a few words?
Thank you. On December 28th, this past year, Mark, Laura, my wife Shannon, and I went out for dinner. And at the beginning of the dinner, Mark and Laura mentioned that it was Mark's birthday. So my first response was, wow, there's probably a couple of thousand people in Miami Beach right now who would love to have dinner with you on your birthday, and you picked my wife and I. And he just said, I'm really excited to have dinner with you guys tonight. And that was him. He made everyone feel so special, like the most important person in the world. But it wasn't an act. That's the way he really felt. I could see it when I talked to him, just generally about our residents. He truly, truly loved Miami Beach and the residents of Miami Beach. Mark was everything good about an elected official. He was a leader. He was fond of saying that each individually has the capacity to do a lot, but without the rest of the commission, the rest of the body, there's not much we can get done. And he recognized that, and he always acted accordingly. And that's a leader. A leader is also making everyone around you better. He would always give me some tips, especially early on after I was elected. He would give me tips about social media, just different things that I just hadn't thought of. And he was like that because he wanted me and everyone else around him to be better. He was also polite, just the nicest person, as Laura mentioned. What a great listener. He really, really genuinely was interested in hearing about other people. And he was polite, as the mayor just said, on the dais. You know, we're a pretty good body in Miami Beach. We are pretty good, we're pretty civil, but there are their moments. But Mark never took the bait. He always stayed civil, he stayed cordial, never made it personal. And I learned from him. I learned by watching him and how he handled himself. And of course, he was residents first. He was very fond of that statement. He lived it, he breathed it, and it meant everything to him. Life is so precious. Today, my mom actually had a surgical procedure that thankfully went very well. But I was reflecting just personally between, is it a coincidence that today my mom is having a procedure and she was asking me to be with her. And then today we're celebrating Mark's life. I don't really believe much in coincidences. It just makes me realize and reflect, life is short, it's so precious. I'm gonna make myself cry, but I'm just thinking of myself just to hug the ones around me, to tell them I love them, because you never know when you're gonna get the chance. But we're here to celebrate Mark. And Laura, you were his best friend. You were his partner. He loved you. He thought the world of you. And you were with him every step of the way, from the campaigns, and I watched you guys, first from afar as just a resident, then as a colleague. But you're always part of the Miami Beach family. We're here for you every step of the way. You're not alone. And just finally, I just want to end off that God took a good one too soon. Mark is, I miss him terribly. I really, really miss him. But I'm always going to remember him and his legacy for me, and I think for many of us, is going to live forever. Thank you.
Thanks, Steve. So you probably know that commissioners and the mayor are part-time jobs, and some are in City Hall more than, it's really not a part-time, but it's supposed to be. And we're not supposed to be there all the time. We typically aren't. But Mark really was there almost all the time. He was not somebody who treated this as a part-time job. I think this is really what he viewed as his life work. And he loved working with the staff. He loved working, so his aides really he was always there with them, and they were very close. And I'd like to ask now Julio Rodriguez to come up and talk a little bit about his boss.
Kind, respectful, attentive, caring, knowledgeable are just some of the many qualities that describe Commissioner Samuelian, which made him a force to be reckoned with. Although my time with him was short, I knew right away the kind of person I was working for. When word spread that I would be joining his office as his aide, many of my colleagues, friends, and beach residents reached out with messages of congratulations centered around his care and diligence for the community he served. You're working for my favorite commissioner. He really cares about our resident. He's a stand-up guy. You'll love working for him. And I must say, they were all correct. Commissioner Samuelian was a man of integrity. As a boss, he was always understanding, thoughtful, and always willing to go the extra mile to make sure that I understood the complexity of any given issue. David Bronstein, a grandmaster chess player, once said, "The most powerful weapon is to have the next move." As a master champion himself, he was always 3 steps ahead of the game, and that translated into his role as a commissioner. He was also an engineer with a striking ability to retain information. I often thought he must have had a supercomputer for a brain. Commissioner Samuelian was not only my boss, but my mentor. The outlook that he provided me with has had a meteoric impact on the way I approach public service. He truly lived up to the adage, "You catch more flies with honey than vinegar." He was a kind man who always steered to do the right thing. A lot of the times, the right thing was not always the popular choice, but he always stuck to his convictions. He was a strong advocate for the residents of Miami Beach, or as we often posted on social media, #ResidentsFirst. Commissioner Samuelian's pro-resident stand was never clearer than after his untimely passing, when messages of condolences, news articles, television coverage began to appear, and every one of them remembered and revered him as a residents' first commissioner, a public servant who put the needs of the residents of Miami Beach above else. Since his passing, walking into City Hall without seeing him at his desk, talking to residents, being briefed by staff, or simply just talking to him about any given topic has been a reality I was not yet prepared for. Let us celebrate his life today. Remember all the good he has done for our community. Walk everywhere, no matter how hot it may be outside, and continue the legacy of this remarkable man. Thank you.
You know, our city is very fortunate that we have legacies of people who've served before us and are always available to give advice. Maddie, whether I want it or not, I'm getting it. So with that, I don't have much to say. Former mayor of our wonderful city, the great Maddie Bauer.
Hi. I know that we're here to celebrate Mark's life, but I mourn very strongly his death. He's gone. Death is forever, and we needed him. We needed him. I remember him smiling, but being very strong. I actually remember, I don't look at commission meetings anymore, but there was an issue I was interested in, and I looked at it, and Mark had 3 points to make. And although the mayor was trying to stop him, Mark very kindly kept saying, I have 3 points to make, and I would like for me to finish those 3 points. And the debate went on for a little while, and it is true. Very politely, with a smile, he kept asking the same 3 points, and he finally got it. So the points, of course, were all about our residents. He cared about all of us. As I looked at the pictures there, I saw the diversity that we had there. And my heart was full of joy, because sometimes we forget how diverse this community is, but he never did. He used to come to the Tuesday morning breakfast club to answer any question at any time with a smile, with that politeness that was mentioned, with the knowledge he had. And he would answer correctly and with love. And as I said to him when he won the second election, I said, you are the senior commissioner now. You need to lead. And he was leading. He was saying stuff for us. And that is a celebration. We got to know Mark Samuelian. And that is a celebration, because he did love the city. He loved us. He did little things. It warms my heart to see the picture of him playing chess with a young child. He paid his due. My friend made me know, Beverly Heller told me, he paid PTA dues to Beach High just to be part of that community. And so he had a special interest. He did have a special interest, and the interest was us, the resident, the city of Miami Beach. He loved Laura and the community as a whole. We will miss him, and I celebrate the fact that I got to know him. Thank you.
Now I'd like to ask to say a few words. A friend of Mark's who lives in DC and came down, and so we appreciate it. Tonyel Koshikian, please come on up. And
wow, what a turnout. What a turnout. I think that shows and says a lot about who Mark was and how many people he touched. Mark Samuelian and I share a lot in common. We're both descendants of genocide survivors. His grandfather, my grandfather served in World War I also, earned his citizenship that way. Came from a family who came to the United States looking for a better life for themselves and their future generations. And boy, aren't we glad that they did. I met Mark and Laura when he was running in 2017, and I remember driving down and meeting with them in their apartment for the first time. And Mark and I would talk more. I interviewed him and got to know him even more for our Florida Armenians website. Then a couple years later, the ambassador of Armenia called me and said he would be coming down to Florida. This would be the first visit of an Armenian ambassador to the state of Florida. And he asked me to set up some meetings, and Mark was first on my list. So when he came down, we met together and had a good, productive lunch and welcomed the ambassador. And a couple years later, as Laura said, they got to travel and return the favor and go to Armenia as well. Mark was the first American of Armenian descent to be elected in Miami-Dade County, and that's a pretty big thing for a small community like the Armenian American community. He gave back to his family, graduating from college, the first of his family to get a college education in the United States, myself as well, so I saw a lot of myself in Mark. He gave back to the community here in Miami Beach, first as an activist and grassroots leader, and of course serving as an elected official. And he gave back to his Armenian American heritage when he led a Miami Beach resolution recognizing what happened in 1915 as genocide, putting the city on record. He was someone you could look up to because he was a good example of what we expect our politicians to be like. He gave back to his country by being a model citizen and a public servant. And I usually end with a quote, so I'm going to give this one to my wife who texted me earlier, who said, "Mark was a good, kind man. We already have too few of those in this world." He did take us too soon, and he will always be remembered as a representative, not just of Miami Beach, but of the wider Armenian American community. Thank you.
give a moment for the, thank you, David Rossi, and thank you to the Miami Beach Classical Music Festival. So I'd like to call up now, everybody knows how smart Mark was. He's a Wharton-educated commissioner, but he also brought people down from Wharton to help him campaign. I don't think anybody else has done that, so I'd like to bring one of his campaign workers up, a classmate of Mark's at Wharton, David Bloomberg. Please come on. I'd like to hear what you have to say.
Thank you, Mayor. Bear with me. I've got some notes. I know all too well what happens if I attempt this without the mind goes blank, and it's awkward. But I don't know about the rest of you, but and this is strange, but I keep expecting Mark to call me. I mean, he always did. Every month or 6 weeks, I'd get a call from Mark, and he'd want to hear about how I'm doing, how my family's doing, how Jackie, my wife's doing, and the kids, the boys. He'd want to talk about some kind of current event, whether it's economic policy of the administration or something going on in Miami. And sometimes we just chat. Sometimes he just wanted someone to bounce an idea off of, and vice versa. And I just, over the last 2 weeks, it's like, where's the call? And it's hard. It's a hard moment when you realize and you think there's not going to be one. Mark and I, we grew up together professionally. We met at Wharton, 1988, and it's kind of like siblings. I think you're very lucky in life when you've got friends that somehow cross the border and become brothers, and siblings that somehow cross the border and become friends. And I'm blessed on both dimensions, and I do have a small number of my very closest friends that feel like brothers. Mark was one of them. We were at Wharton together. He remembers when we first met. I don't. That's a testament to his superior memory. He describes a story, and he finds this hilarious. I don't get it. Maybe some of you will, but he says early, in our first week at Wharton, we were going through some type of orientation, and we had to do presentations to other teams, and his team presented to my team, and he had this big part of the presentation, and I was supposed to give feedback, and we were at Wharton. It's supposed to be brutal, and he swears that my feedback went like this: "We liked what you had to say, but we hated your watch." And for some reason that just tickled the hell out of him. And then after Wharton, we joined the same consulting firm. It was, in those days, it was Anderson Consulting. It became Accenture. Phenomenal company, phenomenally successful. And we rose through the ranks together. We started out as associate, and then we went into senior associate, and then manager, and then senior manager, and then associate partner and partner. We went through all those stages. And it wasn't just normal career progression. It was a gauntlet. The consulting world at that time, there was a lot of, you eat your young. It was rough. And we've worked and found humor and friendship, and working for these crazy bosses and bizarre colleagues and demanding clients, and we shared much of that, and we became very close. We laughed at the insanity together, and we grew tough. Our brains learned to solve complex problems. We learned a bit about self-discipline. We learned a little bit about tenacity, and we learned a lot about friendship under pressure. Jackie and I had our first kid right after we moved out of New York City, The first home we ever took, the first kind of domicile we ever took Toby to was Mark's apartment back in New York. We kind of traveled on the train, and we were in a book club, and we were very, very close that way. He became part of my family. Showed up for my kids' major events, was at both bar mitzvahs and hockey rinks and all that kind of craziness. He was there for us, and countless dinners when we would come to visit Mark and Laura. They had to put up with my crazy teenage boys, and he loved it, and he loved them. You've heard about Mark's qualities. I'll repeat a couple because you can't get tired of it. He's all these things. He's hardworking. He was productive. He's a contributor. He's the guy you wanted on your team. He was no dead weight. He'd carry his load and more. He was nice. He was decent. He was polite in all occasions and pleasant, just pleasant to be with. You could just hang with the guy. And, we talk about kind of, this concept of polite and decency. I saw people, and forgive the French, but I saw people shit on him and treat him badly, disrespectfully. And he never, ever responded in kind. And frequently it was the people he was trying to make a better world for. And he took it all in, and he had, you could tell, he was you could tell that he trusted that they had some perspective that he needed to listen to and to learn from. And that if he kept at it long enough, he could win them over and help them see the value that he was going to have and add for the community. He was balanced. He was fair. He was transparent. He was open. Even when you could tell he didn't want to kind of show his cards, you could ask him, and he would fess up. I'm not going to share that with you yet, and you just came away feeling respected from that. He was curious, thoughtful, smart. He was honest. He was a man of integrity. We've heard those words. He had real humility. He knew what hard work was. He came from humble background, and he never lost sight of that. And that enabled him, I believe, to connect with people of all walks in a really authentic way. And so all those qualities, I haven't even gotten to his superpowers. Right? And so let's spend a minute on those, because I think they're important to kind of really so he was all those things, but here was where he was truly exceptional. And you heard one of these many times, which is his ability to listen. I mean, he was dialed in. And a lot of that, I'm not, and like all of us, I'm thinking about my agenda and you're thinking about what you're going to say next in the conversation, and not Mark. He's hearing you, every single word, and he's trying to understand why, and what drives you, and what's important to you, and how he can find a win-win where he can progress things on his agenda and his vision, and that it wins for you too. His other superpower was asking questions. And this was interesting, as young partners, we compared notes occasionally. And he said, David, he goes, I may not be the best consultant in the world, but I ask the best questions. and he's right. And I saw him in front of senior clients, and he'd ask a question in a way that a light bulb would go off in their head, and they would get something of real meaning. They'd connect two dots that they hadn't done before. And it was so much more powerful than him telling the two dots, right? And because they co-owned it. They kind of owned that piece of information now, and they appreciated it. And they appreciated the opportunity to come to that conclusion on their own and not be spoon-fed. And so he asked questions both to progress a point as well as to learn. His third superpower was discipline. I mean, he was a disciplined, I won't fill in the blank. I'm going to stop cursing from up here. But so one of my favorite examples of Mark's discipline was he was getting ready to kind of really get into the poker world, and so you know what he was doing in his training? He was doing speed chess, right? And so that's kind of like running a marathon in order to kind of get ready to take a walk on the beach, right? And so he'd put hours into it, and no matter what the task was, he had tremendous self-discipline and tenacity. Another superpower, he was always learning. The phrase I like, he was a student of the game, whatever that game was, and I don't mean game in terms of a trivial thing, but if that game was making, figuring out water rise, he was a student. And he would, he'd go above and beyond. And I remember that particular topic, he was like, is it real? Is it not? And how do I get my head wrapped around that? Who are the experts of the world? And will they talk to me? And frankly, they would. And they did. And he spent the time and the energy, his energy, to kind of learn, because he wanted to learn, because he felt that something, that solutions were needed, and he wanted to wrap his engineer's brain around it. And he was always that way. His final superpower I want to talk about was kind of keeping focused on the goal. And, this, I think, was a superpower that he tapped into when times were really tough. And he knew what he wanted to accomplish. He knew what the greater good was, and he wasn't going to get thrown off course. And so you speak rough to him, he's got his mind on the greater good. He's got his mind on that goal, and he's not going to be dissuaded. So those were his superpowers. If you ever kind of want to know what made him crazy, it was irrationality, right? He was like almost Spock-like. He had much better kind of, bedside manner than Spock. But, any kind of, it's like if you were acting irrational, like if you were acting in a way that wasn't aligned with your goals, he's like, it would just drive him crazy. Sometimes drive him crazy with a sense of humor, and other times as a true irritant. If you want to know what he loved, I think he had two true loves. One is Laura in the room with us today, and the second is Miami Beach, and you, the community, and who you represent. And those were his two loves. And he had a vision. He wanted to make this city long-term, sustainable, and a paradise for its residents. And he knew that it was a balancing act. That, it's like 3-year-olds. You can make them happy feeding them candy, but at some point you need to build a future for them. And he wanted a sustainable place, a place that was strong enough economically, a place that kind of balanced the needs of the residents, but also with the needs of good governance. And he was really thinking about the pieces that need to be put in place to make that happen. And that was his long game. And he did not finish. He made progress, but he did not finish. Mark was just getting warmed up professionally. I think he had learned just a tremendous amount in his last decade here on the beach working with you. And I think he was just getting going. And I think there was so much more good that he was going to put his shoulder against. And I really hope that you all can continue his legacy and bring his vision forward. One of the greatest honors of my life is the friendship of really high quality people. And Mark really set the bar on that. And I'm sad as hell that I've lost my friend. And I'm sad for this city and for all of you to lose him as well. But I think his vision and his memory can live on to be a blessing for all of us.
Mark didn't go through the motions with residents. He didn't tell them what they wanted to hear. He listened to them and learned from them, and you could see it in his interactions with them. I'd like to invite up one of my favorite residents, the irrepressible Joe Manning. Let me see. I can take this off.
Ah, great. You're very clever. You really are.
You've said that before, but not as a compliment.
Oh, okay. Get that straight. You know, folks, sometimes the universe really screws up mightily, and it did on June 22nd. David, his friend, who just spoke, you just said it so beautifully. Mark was an inspiration to all of us. He left us too soon. It's a very sad day, this occasion, this celebration, but it is a celebration, and I am so gratified by all the love that is in this room and that people have expressed. It is fantastic. There's nothing like a good friend. I was a friend of Mark's and of Laura's, and it happened in a very silly way that we got to know each other. We were at, as Laura reminded me, the Tuesday Morning Breakfast Club, that famous club that has been around for a few years. We introduced ourselves, and I said to him, I didn't know him, I said to him, your last name, you're Armenian. He said, well, how did you know that? I said, IAN. I've had friends who were Armenian. That's how their last names ended. He said, friends like whom? And the Kardashians? I said, no. I said, but probably even better. I said, one of my good friends is Christine Sarkisian. And those of you who know that's Cher. She was Cher's cousin. And he said to me, oh, did they look alike? And I said, kind of. But Christine told me they looked more alike before they both had their nose jobs. So he said, oh, that's interesting. I said, you don't need a nose job. You have a lovely nose. No one has mentioned how handsome Mark was. He was a really good-looking man, and I am prone to like good-looking men, Dan. But anyway, we bonded over a lot of things from that first silly meeting, that first silly story I told him. I, too, am the grandchild of immigrants to America. Around the same period that Mark's grandparents came, his were fleeing genocide, that awful thing that was done to these wonderful people. Mine were fleeing bad times in the old country. There wasn't enough food. They came, they made a new life for themselves. I, too, like some of the people who spoke tonight, and like Mark, was the first college graduate in my family. Immigrants are wonderful. We have made this country what it is. I speak out for immigrants all the time, and I'm glad to be one of them. I'm glad I could bond with him about that. I also bonded with him over the issue of residents in this city. He really cared. He listened. Everyone has told you that. It's no lie. And he was always ready to listen and to help and to give good solutions. And his aides, Elias and Julio, he taught them well. He mentored them beautifully. They were always there to help. Julio helped me out recently on a problem I had with the county, and I appreciate that. We need more people like Mark in this city. We need more people like Mark in this world. Folks, these people are rare. When you find them, treasure them, nurture them, remember them, love them. Thank you.
So when I heard that Mark Samuelian had become a kindred spirit with my childhood friend Ed Tobin, I was deeply worried and concerned. But as I thought about it, I realized they would be a good pair. So, Eddie?
That was an excellent slideshow, and it really did capture Mark. And I'm certainly that's one of the reasons why I voted for you, Dan. Bloomberg. Whew, I remember we were having drinks at Smith & Walensky with Mark and Laura, and he told that watch story. And one thing about Mark, in addition to all these great things that everybody said about him, was he had a wicked great sense of humor, and he loved to laugh. And he was a resident first man, and I'm going to repeat a lot of the things that other people have said. And Laura, when you said authentic, that was Mark. He was so authentic, and he loved you so much. And when I hear everybody recognizing how great he was and that you had the love of this great man, I know that that'll be in your heart for the rest of your life. He was a super great man with a lot of integrity. And I often expressed my gratitude over the decade that I was friends with Mark. I didn't always agree, but I always made sure to express to him how thankful I was that, I'm a born and raised Miami Beach guy. My grandparents came here in 1917. The city's in my blood, and I always thanked Mark for doing his best to take care of our city, and for having his residents first mantra. I served as a city commissioner from 2007 to 2015, and Mark and I met about a decade ago when I was serving. Mark came and asked me for my support. He was interested in serving, and I was skeptical, as I always am. But Mark's credentials: undergrad from a great engineering school, a Wharton business grad, an Anderson Accenture consultant. I had a cousin that was a consultant for Anderson, and I knew what an unbelievable, to be a partner at Accenture, at Anderson and Accenture, as Bloomberg already told you, that's running the gauntlet, and it's the cream of the crop, and that was Mark. Frankly, Mark seemed too good to be true. So I invited Mark to an agenda review. Once a month, the city manager meets one-on-one with a commissioner, talks about their analysis for the upcoming commission meeting and their recommendations, and millions of dollars in the residents' quality of life on the line. I don't think it's ever been done that someone's invited a civilian, non-staff member, non-employee to one of those meetings. It's like the Wizard of Oz behind the curtain kind of moment. But I invited Mark. And Mark listened, as he does with his head, and he goes back and forth, and and he's so after the meeting, and my agenda reviews were sleeves up, fists flying. It was always, a real meeting. We didn't set up anything ahead of time to make it look like, a perfect world. I wanted for Mark to see it and feel it and analyze it. So after the meeting, we're talking, and here goes Mark with, well, on this side we have, and then he would, and on this side we have, and then, I didn't buy it. I was upset. I thought he was sort of dancing around, not telling me how he felt, because he wanted my support for his commission run, and I was wrong. In typical fashion in that meeting, Mark was thorough and detailed, and he picked up on nuances with a little dash of his sense of humor, but he wouldn't commit on these issues. Well, I learned for the better part of a decade over phone calls and lunches at our favorite spot, that Mark loved to analyze and he loved to problem solve. And he was good at it. And he had a great sense of humor. But he loved that analysis. And always with me, and I don't know if he did it with other people, but he would give this side, and then he would give that side, and then he would go, "What say you?" And then we would have our discussions. His fellow commissioners reaped a secret benefit from Mark's passion for analysis. Mark never, ever, ever had a bad, a mean, or a nasty comment about his colleagues. Instead, Mark would offer the other side, the counterpoint, and explain that maybe his colleague had disagreed because there was two sides or three sides to the issue. He was such a gentleman, such a class act. You could really set your watch to his kind and even disposition. Before getting down to business, as Bloomberg pointed out, Mark always asked about me and my family. He would remember details that we had discussed years earlier. You know, he listened. You know, he listened because he cared, because he was so thoughtful. As was pointed out, you know, we're all busy in our own heads, but when Mark gave you attention, you were it. And he listened and he cared. And like I said, he would say, you know, well, didn't you tell me? It would be something I told him last year. But he always asked. He was always genuinely, authentically concerned. He'd tell me about his latest Laura and him adventure. He spoke about Laura in the way that you really are over the moon in love. And that's how he felt about you. And even in our private conversations, when you weren't around, and many times you were around, and when we were discussing and analyzing the issues, but when we were on our own or talking out for lunch, he always was, you know, that was one of the things that we covered before we got down to business, was me and you, how much he loved you. Not about himself, but you. First me, how's my family, how's this, and then gushed about you, and then we get down to business and talk about whatever it was that we were going to talk about. He offered his time, his intellect, and his exceptional problem-solving skills to everyone because of what a thoughtful person he was. Mark was brilliant, he was thoughtful, and he had a great sense of humor. I'm a better person for my friendship with Mark. What an unexpected shock. So given that unexpected and terrible things sometimes happen, should we go back to our lives and after this celebration, or should we maybe consider telling the people that we love how much we love them and spending more time and energy and thoughtfulness with those people that we love and we care about? What say you? Thank you.
If there was an organization that was created to advance a Mark Samuelian agenda, it was Miami Beach United. Tanya Bott, a friend of his, not just from Miami Beach United, but from the community, is here to say a few words about her friend Mark.
Don't worry, I do actually have prepared remarks. Otherwise, I could go on for quite some time, and nobody needs that. But I do want to start in deference to the mayor's fabulous slideshow and to the comments that David made about the superpowers and how much we all already miss Mark and will miss Mark really forever. I would like to encourage us to, when we feel the need of Mark in our lives, to adopt the Mark stance, which we've learned is this. And just kind of own it, feel it, Be grounded, be open, be welcoming, and be Mark. I mean, that would make us all of us, a better person. And to share that with others is the gift that he gave us all. As Dan said, my name is Tanya Bott, and I stand before you on this important occasion where we will mourn a shocking loss of a wonderful, wonderful human being, and we also celebrate with joy his very meaningful life. I was humbled and deeply honored when Laura asked me to say a few words about Mark at this service, this memorial and celebratory service. And as I started to put together my comments, I realized that, like Mark, I would have three things to say: how he mentored me and others, how he led, and what his legacy will be. We met in 2015 on the campaign trail. He was running for office, and I was helping to run a mayoral challenge. Sadly, neither of us prevailed that year, but that didn't stop us from moving forward. As anybody who has ever worked on a campaign or run for office knows, there is a lot of hurry up and wait. Interesting relationships get forged when you're standing around at an event or at a polling place in hopes of answering questions for last-minute undecided voters or people who want to feel you out. We had a lot of time to talk and quickly discovered that we had a lot in common. As soon as I heard that Boston accent, I knew that there was a great starting point, since I had moved to Boston, from Boston to Miami Beach the same year as Mark did. But there was so much more. He was the youngest ever national chess champion from the state of Massachusetts. I can do the New York Times mini crossword in under a minute, and it's really almost the same thing. He was the first member of his family to go to college, and not only graduated from Wharton with an MBA, but he also graduated as an industrial engineer from the University of Georgia. I can put together an IKEA bookshelf. I mean, really. But seriously, we did discover that we had a lot in common. We valued robust discussion of the issues of the day and found that we could do it without collapsing into name-calling and hurling invective, as can happen all too often and has only gotten worse in the intervening years. As a member of Miami Beach United since 2014, before he even ran for office, and on the board of directors by February of 2015, Mark encouraged my nascent city activism. He stayed active with MBU, even though he didn't prevail in his first election, and by 2016, he was deeply involved in supporting Nancy Liebman in running it. Some of his most notable accomplishments on the board, and then as president before stepping down to run and win in his 2017 election, include: as the vice chair of the committee, he helped champion and get passed into legislation the Residents' Right to Know ordinance, which has significantly improved the way the city notices residents on issues which affect their quality of life. If you can look something up about something happening in your neighborhood, that's the Residents' Right to Know ordinance. Getting residents involved with the process of building the new Convention Center Hotel, not yet built, you might have noticed, but getting that process going, including creating a steering committee of residents to shepherd the Convention Center Hotel project through a thoughtful analysis process on where it should be constructed and get resident support for the project overall. And last but not least, during his tenure at MBU, helping to defeat the light rail project most residents referred to as the train to nowhere. However, Mark would be the first to claim that he just helped, that people like Mark Needle and Nancy Liebman and others were instrumental in getting those things done. But he was always modest, and he was always a mentor. When he recognized that we had similar ways of thinking, he encouraged me to get involved with MBU and invited me in 2016 to join the board. We worked together very well. He was beyond encouraging, and he gave me confidence to put my professional skills and intellectual curiosity to use on city issues and on running the marketing and communications side of the business for MBU. Over the years, He gave me so much of his time to kick around ideas on how to make our city better, how to deal with thorny issues, how to tame my sometimes passionate rhetoric in service of being more effective. I cannot tell you the number of times he responded to an email or picked up the phone when I called and started with, "I may have to jump off. I'm just on my way to catch a flight. I'm just on my way into a concert. I'm just on my way into a show." Of course, always with Laura. But he always had time for me and for others. He led by example, and he delighted in seeing his mentees succeed. I owe so much of my personal growth as an activist in this city to his coaching, confidence, and encouragement. And I would venture that there are most of us in this room who could say the same, one way or the other. Because that's how he was with everyone. Mark had an innate curiosity to really understand the issues at hand. He had a very quiet way of drawing out the person with whom he was speaking to get to the heart of the matter. He was approachable. He was open-minded. He was seeking to find the best resolution to thorny issues which would provide the best outcome for the maximum number of people. It was never just about doing something for one group. It was trying to do the right thing for the most people affected. He didn't accept one-size-fits-all solutions when, with a bit more work, a bit more analysis and conversation, he could find solutions that were more nuanced. Mark had so much that he could have bragged about. So much success, especially at such an early age, can create arrogance. Instead, he was beloved. He is beloved in a city that does not agree on much and does so loudly and sometimes with vitriol, for being a thoughtful servant of his constituents. As you've heard time and again today, he listened and he cared. He wasn't sure his way was the only way to get something done. He kept asking questions until he got to a set of answers that suited his engineering mind and his resident heart better. He didn't cave in the face of bullies. He was absolutely unflappable. I've watched commission meetings from my office where I would be texting him furiously saying, "That's ridiculous, how can they say that?" And go off on text, and he would just say, "Yep," and keep doing his Mark thing. He didn't cave in the face of bullies or threats or name-calling, whether it was online or on the dais. Adam Grant, an organizational psychologist, author, and top-rated professor at Mark's alma mater, Wharton, said this about leadership recently, and I think it fits Mark to a T. People with a surplus of confidence and a shortage of character never fail to disappoint. Leadership skill is inversely related to the size and fragility of ego. Humility, generosity, and honor are underrated virtues. The most principled person is the best poised to serve. Whoever is elected to a seat will have large shoes to fill, and I hope that she or he does so with the same grace, intellectual curiosity, giant grin, and open ears that Mark had. To Mark's family and friends, and most especially to Laura, we share your loss, we celebrate Mark's life, and we as a community are all here for you. Thank you.
So Mark really was a great mentor. If you know about his chess program that he started regionally, he was helping young people learn how to love and succeed in chess. But he was also a mentor to a lot of young people. One of them is going to speak today, and I was going over Robert's, I'd forgotten how much your resume actually reflected his. Robert graduated from the University of Pennsylvania. Robert Patel graduated from University of Pennsylvania. He's co-founder and chair of the Resilience Youth Network, one of Mark's great passions. And he'll be starting school at fall at a little university in Cambridge, MIT, to study civil engineering, as Mark was an engineer. Ladies and gentlemen, Robert Patel.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you all for joining us of this celebration of Mark Samuelian's life. Few people are as universally trusted and admired by friends and colleagues the way Mark Samuelian was. As both a person and city commissioner, Mark always placed ethics first, even when he knew it would make him less popular in certain circles. His tireless dedication to our residents was Herculean, especially when it came to championing the causes he believed in. Most of the time, Mark worked selflessly behind the scenes. He rarely got or took credit for it. But that didn't matter to Mark. For him, it was just the right thing to do. By showing up today, each of you is celebrating this legacy. The unity of our community is a testament to the character of people I've known as a kid who grew up in Miami Beach, to the positive ways that Mark touched all of our lives, and to Laura, whose resolve to honor Mark the way he wanted is in itself a reason to celebrate. And so too is my relationship with Mark. Mark and I first met in the spring of 2020, when the world, and life as I'd known it, abruptly changed. It was my junior year at the University of Pennsylvania, and here I was, back at home with my family in Miami Beach. Like many of us, I was pretty down on life. I missed my friends, I was afraid that my parents would get sick, and I longed for the way things used to be. But Mark gave me hope for the future by taking me under his wing and eventually offering me an internship after my summer job was canceled. No doubt, in the early days, I wasn't much help to Mark, a highly perceptive man who had a successful background in engineering and management consulting. In our first weeks working together, in typical Mark fashion, he'd respond to the briefings I'd prepared for him in that tactful and understated way of his that I'm sure many of you will recognize. I'd eagerly ask, "So Mark, what you think?" He'd take a pause, breath, and then say, "Well, Rob, it's a great start." No matter the deadlines or pressure he was under, Mark was always kind and respectful. And yeah, obviously this sounds redundant at this point, but he really, at least for me, he really valued my enthusiasm and my interest in sustainability over my inexperience. And I'm really grateful that he did. Mark was a true mentor to me. Thanks to his support and his example, I've grown in many ways and directions I never could have imagined. Mark, as Mayor Gelber mentioned, encouraged me to found the Resilience Youth Network, which is a nonprofit organization that advances the career and advocacy goals of young people who care about climate adaptation. And Mark actually jumped to become our organization's first non-institutional donor, which means a lot. And always inclusive, Mark went out of his way to introduce me to a number of leaders around our city, who I now also call mentors, such as Nisan Kazdan, former Miami Beach mayor, who built the very new World Center we gather in, and Aris Papadopoulos, founder of the United Nations Private Sector Initiative, now known as ARISE, and chair of the Resilience Action Fund. On behalf of Aris, it's my privilege to announce that the Resilience Action Fund has pledged $50,000 to create a Mark Samuelian Award in Urban Resilience. Thank you, Aris. With this donation, an annual award will recognize individuals or organizations who demonstrate practical success in implementing hazard resilience measures and strategies across South Florida. And to honor Mark's contributions to our city, other organizations are following suit. For instance, the Miami Design Preservation League is looking to build a memorial garden with permanent public chessboards in one of Mark's favorite places, like maybe on his beloved home of Belle Isle, or along Ocean Drive in the Art Deco Historic District. Mark was, after all, an international master in chess. He'd whoop my butt when we played, but he'd never brag or rub it in. And, Mark was always a gentleman, as everyone has sort of noted. And that word that just keeps coming up for me is that he was always civil, which is a quality I guess you don't necessarily hear that often, but it's certainly one that I aspire to be. So at 23, I never thought I'd be asked to give a eulogy. It makes me think of all the things I didn't get to say but I wish I had. So I'm going to take this moment to say goodbye. Mark, thank you for believing in me. Thank you for teaching me by showing me what a life of true service looks like. And above all, thank you for the kindness you showed me as a friend during a time in my life when I really needed one. I will miss you.
So Mark really cared that government looks at itself with great scrutiny, and that's why he was so supportive of the Inspector General program here. He also had a friend who was an Inspector General, so Jody, Breeze, come on up. I saw a lot of pictures of you all in your trip to Armenia, so here you go.
Thank you so much, Mayor. It was Mark's pride in his Armenian heritage that drew him to Jack in November of 2018 at a crowded event at a marina in Coconut Grove, a Global Ties event. Jack was wearing a name tag with his name on it, Karagasian. So the IAN or YAN at the end of Armenian names translates to descended from or son of. So Karagasian means son of Karaguz, and Samuelian means descended or son of Samuel. That night in the Grove, Mark came up to Jack, cocked his head to the side, beamed that unforgettable smile, and asked, "Would you happen to be of Armenian descent?" Mark was descended from Armenian immigrants who came to the US at the time of World War I, when some of the more fortunate Armenians escaped from what became known as the Armenian Genocide. Mark's parents were both born in the US and met at an Armenian church picnic. Both had both parents born from the same region of Armenia called Malatya. They fell in love, married, and raised 3 children quite modestly in Dedham, Massachusetts. They named their second son, Mark George Samuelian, after the Americanized names of their own fathers, her father Marcos and his father Gevorg. This little boy Mark was so thoroughly Armenian that early on he discovered he had an extraordinary love and ability for a game that is a national pastime in Armenia and a mandatory subject in its schools. But to attend chess events and tournaments, Mark needed to raise his own funds. At the age of 7, he got a paper route. Later, he collected stray golf balls from around the greens of a local golf course, which paid him by the milk crate. In high school, he worked 2 jobs that, along with chess, set him on a course that positioned him to become the public servant we came to know. One of the jobs he worked in high school was as a Little League baseball umpire, making and suffering the consequences of controversial decisions at a very early age. He would later say that serving on the commission dais was akin to calling balls and strikes. Another job in high school was as a paid telephone pollster for a candidate in a local election. Now, this really impacted Mark, and he told his mother that he had found his life's calling and that he wanted to go into politics. As any mother who loved her child would say, she said, "No." However, she also said he could do better by first establishing himself in a career and then giving back to the community. So he became the first to go to college. He went to Georgia Tech for his industrial engineering degree and Wharton for his MBA. And as you know, Accenture hired him out of grad school, and a very successful career as a business advisor and financial investor was born. But Mark did more than build an impressive career. He also built a values-based, authentically moral center. As Mom instructed, it was then that he turned to serving his community. Mark brought business savvy, financial expertise, and true intellect to his commission position. He brought an extremely analytical approach to problem solving, born of his chess skills and developed in his schooling and business career. He made decisions for the community as he did in his personal life, always thinking 3 steps ahead, if this, then that, if that, then that, and always, always thinking over and over. Mark also brought to public service that values-based moral center that started with the paper route and grew from there. Discipline, energy, curiosity, confidence, patience, diplomacy, empathy, humility, attentiveness, and warmth. These were the same qualities, of course, that made us all feel special when he spoke with us, and why we treasure his friendship so much. The love of his life, Laura, shared every one of Mark's dreams. They shared every value together, and his dreams were her dreams, and her dreams were his. When Mark shared his dream to visit Armenia, it was Laura who spent countless hours researching, emailing, telephoning, and planning. We know because we were there. In August of 2019, we took that trip with them and another couple Mark and Laura had introduced us to. So the Samuelians, the Karaguzians, and the Hagopians went to see iconic Mount Ararat for the first time together. We visited 1,000-year-old churches and saw their relics and rituals. We silently walked the Armenian Genocide Museum. We watched as Mark stood speechless before a monument dedicated to those who were killed in the genocide in Malatya, where his 4 grandparents were born. We witnessed Mark fully appreciating the place of his ancestors and how history caused them to bring him to our world. Mark, we are grateful they brought you to us and that you built your center as you did. You will always be with us, and we promise to honor your memory by never taking life for granted and always striving to build our own centers.
Mark loved Laura, Laura loved Mark, but he also adored your family. So coming up is George Dominguez, Laura's brother.
What can I say about Mark that hasn't already been shared? It's clear that he was truly an amazing man. Someone of principle who was beloved by his many friends and the community alike, and was really passionate about making a difference for what he believed in. But I was also lucky enough to know yet another side of Mark as part of our family. My sister Laura and Mark began dating almost 10 years ago, and it was clear since day one that the love and devotion they shared for one another was special. Mark fit right in with our family, as we always share birthdays, holidays, and other special events together. He was so kind and caring with our parents, which I genuinely appreciated, and they treated him as another son to them too. They took such great pride in his successes and always supported him every step of the way. He would often ask my wife and I how we were doing, which was so nice because he would give us his honest perspective on whatever it is that we were speaking about, and we really valued his opinion. Even with our own children, Mark made it a point to spend quality time with them, from playing hide and seek with my daughter, or even teaching my son how to play chess. It was clear how much he genuinely cared about them. But most of all, I'm thankful for having had Mark in my life for the past 10 years, because he not only set such a great example for my children to see what a good person should be like, he was also a great example for me, and I will cherish those memories of him forever. What I can tell you is this: as Mark took his final breath, he was surrounded by those of us who loved and cared about him deeply. But most of all, Laura, who hugged and sang their favorite songs to him, face to face, up until the very end. It was so terribly sad and beautiful all at the same time. Please always remember Mark for the kind and gentle person that he was. We all miss him dearly and very much. Thank you.
Claire McCord is one of the real resident leaders of our city. She has been involved in leadership in the South of Fifth Neighborhood Association, SOFNA, for many years. She is exacting, she's always civil, she's a detail-oriented, and it is no wonder in my mind that you and Mark hit it off so well.
Good afternoon, or evening, I guess now. It's such a pleasure and an honor to be here to celebrate the life of our friend, my friend, Mark. It has been said that there is no substitute for involvement. Where there is no involvement, there can be no life. Mark's life was characterized by an intense involvement with everything he did. His engagement with and commitment to people, his steadfast belief in good data and good process, his perseverance in the service of true representation. But today, I'd also like, as others have done before, to celebrate Mark's brilliance, not just his amazing intellect, which everyone, of course, has noted and talked about, but also the bright, inclusive, can-do energy, the passion that he brought to everything he did. That energy was, I think, possibly the key engine in many ways of so many of his accomplishments. And it certainly was a key to the deep, heartfelt connection he forged with so many people, so many of us. Mark and I met in the summer of 2015 when he came to a South of Fifth Neighborhood Association membership meeting. He was running as a candidate, and he came up to introduce himself to the board. I remember thinking that day, he's so genuine and unaffected. And I said to him, "You seem to me to be the antithesis of a politician." It's then that I saw that energy. He lit up. He was totally engaged. He leaned in, and he said, "Well, that's about right." He said, "I'm here to listen and to learn. I'm here to help. With me, there will never be politics as usual." And of course, he kept his word. Through the years that followed, I got to know Mark through my roles on the SOFNA board, working with him as an ally, a colleague, an elected representative, and a friend. Although Mark was not elected to the commission until 2017, as we all know, he chose not to reduce his involvement. Instead, he doubled down. He did more. He went to more meetings. He learned more about our city. He talked to more and more people. He and Laura were all over. They were at our meetings, and people talked and he listened. He made himself available to people in our neighborhood almost any time in an easy, relaxed, but committed way. People knew he cared. As a commissioner, Mark remained involved with us in Sofna, attending meetings and texting or calling regularly, sometimes just to hear what was on people's minds. I remember a conversation in which I thought he was calling about a specific item that was to come before the commission, but he was just calling to find out what people were thinking. I said to him, "We don't have a position yet." He said, No, I just wanted to hear what people are thinking. Because, great chess player that he was also wanting to be proactive, wanting to be moves ahead. Mark and I also connected regularly during the early phases of the First Street infrastructure project. He was eager, as always, to understand what our residents thought about the project, what they wanted to see, how things were going for them. As we know, his record of work in resilience is robust. Residents citywide appreciated his long-standing commitment to clear information, resident participation, of course, and collaboration with the city. I am honored to be Mark's appointee to the newly formed Ad hoc Neighborhood Resilience Projects Advisory Committee, which he sponsored and championed. And I know his spirit will always be present at our meetings. By the way, just to reprise a theme of Mark's questioning and how he treated everyone, of course, he and I didn't always agree. And it was always okay not to agree with Mark. You just had to be ready for the questions and the on this hand or on that hand. And I enjoyed that, and he enjoyed it too, obviously. He appreciated, he respected, and he sought out other people's ideas and opinions. He wanted to know, he wanted to understand. And after the gauntlet of questions that he would present to me, if I made it through, he would say, "Claire, that's good. Thank you for sharing that. That's something we have to consider." Finally, as I was reviewing my text messages with Mark over the past, 7 years in preparation for today, I noticed how many times his response to any question I would have about a meeting or a call or a piece of information would be one word that I think demonstrated his continuous positive engagement. He would say, "Sure." I read that word, I stopped counting at about 40, but every time I read the word, I could hear his voice, the engagement, the joy at being engaged with us, at being our commissioner, happy and willing to engage with us no matter what time we reached out, no matter what the topic. Mark's brilliance, obviously, had many, many facets. But in closing, I'd like to ask everyone to take just a few seconds and call up at least one memory you have of Mark's high energy and his positive spirit. Maybe at an event, a meal, a meeting, someplace where you experienced that joy of engagement that characterized his life. Thank you for taking a moment to collectively share the energy, the joyful, hopeful spirit that will remain with us always, inspiring us to be better ourselves and to live and work better together. Blessings. Thank you, Laura. Thank you, friends and family. Thank you, City of Miami Beach. But most of all, thank you, Mark. We love you.
Stephen's coming down. Stephen Kester came down from North Florida. Stephen went to both Georgia Tech and Wharton with Mark, and you were his first campaign manager for student body president. All right, you started the whole thing. Come on up.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My name's Steve Kester. I'm here with my wife, Chris, and we live in Santa Rosa Beach, Florida. As the mayor alluded, I first met Mark when we were freshmen at Georgia Tech over 40 years ago. And as he indicated, fun fact was that I was his first campaign manager when he ran for student body president. We lost. Or as my wife would say, we came in second place, which wouldn't that honor Mark, because he always kind of looked at the bright side of things. And I think the credit I take is that Mark realized the benefit of having a good campaign manager by his side, and I think everybody will recognize the great job Laura has been. And my role was reduced to writing checks to Mark's campaigns, and he fared a lot better. Mark was the son of a barber and a homemaker, immigrants. And can you imagine how proud they must have been at the things Mark did and the places he went to and the people he met? It's really pretty fascinating. You know, Facebook tells us that we can have hundreds or thousands of friends. And, you know, we all know if we have a handful of really deep, meaningful relationships, we're lucky. And of that handful, there might be only a couple that you're connected with intellectually, philosophically, and morally. And I had that with Mark for 40 years. And Mark was my one-of-one friends, and I miss him dearly. But he was your friend too. As one of his closest friends for decades, everybody talked about how civil Mark was in front of the dais and in the media and meeting with residents. But I'm not a politician and I'm not a local, so Mark, you know, confided with me often about his colleagues, both those that agreed with him and maybe those who didn't. And I'm here to tell you, you know what? Here's the scoop. He never had one bad word to say about a fellow commissioner, an opponent, a beach employee, or a resident. And as many people have pointed out, when people disagreed, he went to painstaking lengths to try to understand their position. In fact, I remember when he was running in an election, somebody popped off on social media and called Mark a MAGA Trump supporter. And I called him and I was furious with Mark. Mark, how can you just take this lying down? And he said, well, you know, maybe they just thought we both spent a lot of time in New York. And I thought, you know, for crying out loud, Mark, can't you just throw somebody under the bus like the rest of us? And today we're quick to label people as heartless or brainless or whatever, but that wasn't Mark. There's an expression that Stephen Covey has, and it goes like this: seek first to understand, then be understood. Seek first to understand, and then be understood. And I don't think anybody personified that better than Mark. Wouldn't it be a great tribute to Mark if we all went home tonight and practiced a little bit of that in our life? Laura, Chris, Mark spoke to Chris and I very often about his love for you, your steadfast hand in the campaigns. He loved your family. You know, in fact, I thought these were his brothers and sisters, the way he talked about everybody, and really just basked in the warmth of your family. And I know, like you miss him dearly. Mark and I had a tradition at lunch that at the end of the lunch, we often fought over who was going to get the check. And maybe fought is a bad word, maybe debated. Because let's be honest, Mark could have an intellectual debate about what day of the week it is. Mark's gone, but what will live on is his impact on me and my family, and which Mark generously gave his time to. And I was just struck, being the last speaker, you know, every single person that came up here talked about how Mark leaned into them. And boy, isn't that a role model that we can all aspire to. Mark's impact, we all know about his honesty, his compassion, his thoughtfulness, and his willingness to understand before being understood. And I celebrate the 40 years that I had with Mark. What a treasure that is. Like many people, everything's gone too fast, and I miss him dearly and love him. Thank you.
This time I'd like to ask the Very Reverend Father Simeon Adabashian to please come up for a closing prayer. And then I think we're going to have a little music.
Please rise once again. I just want to say it's been a blessing for me to be here. The decision for me to come happened less than 24 hours ago, coming from New York to be part of this celebration for a son of our Armenian people. It means a lot to me. And Laura, it is so good to meet you. One of the speakers said that doesn't believe in coincidence and how all things come together. I grew up in Dedham, Massachusetts. I was born in 1962, so one last thing, when I was looking at the photos, I remember his mom. So I'm sure I knew Mark, positive. So God bless you. O Father of compassion and God of all consolation, who consoles us in all our afflictions and sadness, you afflict and you heal, and you never leave those whom you have created. Grant them, O Lord, a temperate and a comforted spirit. Comfort those who are afflicted in heart and heal the wounds of their sorrows, so that recovering from the grief of their sorrow, with firm hope in your glory, they may glorify your great dominion, now and always, and unto the ages of ages. Amen. Be blessed by the grace of the Holy Spirit. Go in peace, and may Jesus, who is the resurrection and the life, be with you all. Amen.
All right, everybody sit down. We're going to just have one more song, and I want to thank everybody for coming. Laura, the family, to the friends, thank you for sharing this wonderful man with our community. Celebrating a kind, gentle, thoughtful, intellectual guy like Mark wasn't so hard celebrating that, because frankly, it's easy to celebrate that, but living up to his expectations and his example is something we should all consider. With that, the Miami Beach Classical Music Festival. And after that, thank you all for coming.
When all the world is a hopeless jumble and the raindrops tumble all around, heaven opens so magically. When all the clouds darken up the skyways, there's a rainbow highway to be found, leading from your window pane, leading way wish upon a star and wake up where the clouds are far behind me, where troubles melt like lemon drops away above the chimney tops. That's where you'll find me, somewhere over the rainbow. Bluebirds fly, birds fly over the rainbow. Why then, oh, why can't I? If happy